couple more minutes. It looks like some of our participants are still dialing in. So we'll start shortly. Thank you. Okay, I think we will get started then. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. My name is Ben de Guzman. I am the director for the Mayor's Office on Asian and Pacific Islander Affairs here in the district. And so I wanted to welcome you all on behalf of our office to our community leaders meeting. We're excited. We're stressed out as we're heading into the end of the fiscal year. For those of you who recognize what that means, I can feel your sympathy. No, but in all seriousness, when we began the idea of doing community leader meetings like this, heading into the current fiscal year, we thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of reconfigure the ways in which we did outreach to our community, right? To have sort of more targeted meetings like this, where we engaged our key stakeholders to talk about some of the critical issues of the moment. I think when we first articulated that idea and thought of doing it once a quarter, none of us could have any idea of what the fourth quarter would look like. So here we are. We're in a pandemic moment. The census is happening. We're just about to get ready to start early voting. And so a lot of these issues that we already knew were happening in terms of political and civic engagement are upon us, but also a whole new slew of issues and concerns. And so it is certainly a very loaded moment that we come to you today. So we thank you for joining us. I'm really excited about the conversation we're about to have. And I say this because there is really expertise on all sides of the WebEx meeting, right? Like the panelists bring some of the key expertise in key policy areas that our agency works on in city government. And our participants represent our commissioners. So we have many of our commissioners on the call, which is great. We have many of our grantees who are working in partnership with us to serve some of our most underserved communities. We have other key leaders in the community, and we're proud to have you on board. So that said, I wanted to just walk you a little bit through our agenda. We are going to have, we're doing the opening now. We'll guide you a little bit through some of the ground rules. Excuse me. And I'm giving the welcome right now, so we may have jumped the gun a little bit on that, but we'll go from the ground rules, we'll head right into our opening presentations. We'll give bios for our presenters, and then they'll provide brief opening comments, and then we'll do a Q&A. We actually have a special guest who will make a brief presentation as we head into that question and answer period. So as we go into ground rules now, I wanted to introduce our Public Information Officer, James Yu, who will talk you through the ground rules that will govern. It's really technical things related to WebEx. So James. James, are you with us? He's moving something around. James, are you there? He's handling our technology stuff. So actually, let me see if I can step in for him. It looks like he is moving around some things. So basically, you can see the ground rules here, right? All of the participants will be muted for the training, and we're going to share questions and answers via the chat box and the Q&A box. So we thank you for your patience in advance. We're looking to attempt to answer all of your questions that are submitted to us. We have staff on hand that are forwarding some of the questions that we receive so that I can look at them and feed them to our presenters. And you can see here how to ask a question. You can see the chat box and that sort of thing, and you can type in your question and then send. Okay. So James is back with us now, but I will continue to go. Is there a next slide, James? Okay. So yeah, so we'll do this. We've done this before. Many of you have been on with us either in our previous WebEx sessions or in other WebEx meetings with other folks. So we trust that we will be able to get through all of this together. So I'm pleased to welcome our first presenter then. You can see his bio here. Larry Handerhan is the Chief of Staff for the DC Department of Human Services. He's been a longtime friend of mine from before both of us were in city government together. But I will say that the Department of Human Services is one of our key agencies. And so our staff work hand in hand with DHS to make sure that our residents, again, some of our most vulnerable residents, are able to access the important programs that DHS offers. Larry, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Director. I'm really happy to be here and thankful for the opportunity. I think, like the Director said, a lot of us are thinking about how we can better communicate in a world that's all virtual and take advantage of opportunities that didn't feel accessible before, but actually are great ways to get out our message. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Department of Human Services and what we're offering during the pandemic. Just to start, I've been the Chief of Staff for about 3.5 years. I came from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. This is I feel very privileged to do this work, particularly in this time. Wanted to kind of start by saying thank you to all the community leaders who are on the line. I think it's really easy. You are, by virtue of the roles that you're in, I know that you're doing caretaking work and advocacy work, and probably also going through a lot of loss and trauma yourself. This has been an opportunity for DHS staff and leadership to reflect on that in our own lives and how we can make our programs more accessible, more culturally competent, and more effective, given that it's never been more important to be a social safety net like DHS. Moving on to the next slide, I'm going to share kind of the 3 areas that we're really focused on in the pandemic. The first one is ensuring that district residents can maintain or get access to critical public benefits. We operate all the program, the DHS operates eligibility determination for the majority of federal and a number of local benefit programs, including SNAP, TANF, and Medicaid. So up here, you can see all of the different ways that people can be accessing those programs right now. We have a call center that we have added staff to ensure it can handle the capacity. The number's on the line. If you can't see it, it's 202-727-5355. But most of our in-person sites and the work that we would normally handle there are being directed to new interventions or new access points that we've started in the pandemic. So I want to really, really push that we have a new mobile app for residents to sign up for a new program like food stamps they may not have gotten in the past, or to recertify for a program that they are deemed eligible for. The app is going to be a really great way to do that. So you don't have to wait on the phone, you don't have to wait in person. This is something we launched about 2 months ago and have had incredible success from our perspective, because clients can do this on their phone from their home safely. We also have a web portal that has an online fillable form if you'd rather do something outside of an app. You can still mail in applications, and you can actually pick up applications at 3 of our 5 service centers, which you can see on the right-hand side. This is kind of a one-stop shop. So whether it's food assistance, cash assistance, these are venues that you can take advantage of, and DHS staff can help you figure out what your constituents may be eligible for. We have also worked a lot with the federal government to increase the food access and supports that exist, given how troubling that scenario is for a lot of folks in the district. So I can talk a little bit more about that later, but we have a program called Pandemic EBT. We've also plussed up a lot of the SNAP benefits. So a household that was normally getting $200 before the pandemic might be getting $300 now. Moving on to the next slide. The other major item I want to share with you today is our commitment to maintaining access to shelter and housing. This has never been more important. There is an eviction moratorium, which I imagine some of my colleagues will talk about. But that doesn't mean that illegal evictions aren't happening, and it doesn't mean that residents should wait to act. So I'm not going to steal any thunder from the other presenters who could speak much more eloquently on this than I can, but we are still providing the entire continuum of care for homeless services in DC through Department of Human Services and our providers. If you know anyone experiencing housing instability, they should call the DHS shelter hotline. That's always the number you call for, adults that you might see on sheltered homelessness out on the street. But right now, it's also doing all of the intake for families who are seeking homeless services, whether that be a shelter stay, prevention program to meet with the case manager to understand what supports they might be able to get, or really just to know, hey, I'm staying somewhere that feels safe right now, but I'm not sure how much longer I can stay here. What are my options? You want to call the shelter hotline. We also have a portal on our website that mirrors the coronavirus.dc.gov/rent portal. And those are up there in kind of one-stop shops for all the broader resources that are offered in the district. So DHS is, a partner to many others in this space, and we're trying to do a better job of sharing that information at those links. I get a lot of questions about encampments, which is actually managed by the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services. So I thought I'd include the email. If you see someone living in a tent and you are worried about their safety or those around them, you can email that email on your screen, and we can take it from there. So going on to the next slide, in my last slide is just where to get additional information. So I'm happy to save the remainder of my time for the question and answer session. What I did see a question in the chat that talks about some of the work we're doing to ensure that our shelters are safe. So we run, all the congregate shelter sites in the district, and the vast majority, I should say, and we are very proud of the efforts that we've taken to make sure that transmission has stayed very low in those settings. We actually report all that data out in real time through this, what's called the storyboard. So you can go online and actually look at every single positive case in shelter. We have de-densified our shelters, implemented very aggressive cleaning procedures, grab and go meals, daily screening. And we also have a series of hotel rooms that are reserved for anyone who exhibits symptoms so that they can quarantine away from the rest of the residents staying at the shelter. We've also proactively quarantined a number of medically vulnerable residents experiencing homelessness. Were they to get sick, would have really dire health consequences. They are also residing in hotels right now. So I'm confident, after talking to a number of my colleagues, that we are running one of the most aggressive modified operations for our low barrier shelters of any jurisdiction in the country. That's a testament to the leadership of this mayor, and I'm really proud to do this work. Doesn't mean it's easy, and it doesn't mean that we haven't lost lives, and we continue to welcome any and all feedback for how we can do this better. You see that email on the screen. That's checked by me among other people. You can email any questions or concerns. And I also included a link if you know anyone who might be able to rent to clients experiencing homelessness through one of our voucher programs or housing assistance programs. We are all ears. Please send an email to newleaseonlife@dc.gov. Thank you so much for the time.
Great, thank you, Larry. As you pointed to, we're already having some questions. So I think we will hold off. We actually have reserved a significant amount of time for questions and answers. So I think that our opening presentations, we'll just go ahead and go through them right now. And then we're holding your questions in the Q&A box, and we're curating them, and then we'll be presenting them as we head into the Q&A, just for your information. I'm pleased to turn to our next presenter, Director Polly Donaldson, Director of the DC Department of Housing and Community Development. You can see her bio here. I have a personal pet peeve in that I want to respect the people who wrote their bios. So whenever I see a bio, it's part of our PowerPoint slide, I will not read it in its entirety for you. So you can read it here. We'll be sharing the PowerPoint with you afterwards as well. So, but that allows me to talk more directly about Director Donaldson and the important work she does. She has been with this administration since the beginning, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely.
Yes, and
Yes.
so she's been, here working with the mayor on really many of the important issues regarding housing and community development. So it's kind of a field that I'm learning a lot about as I've begun my own career here in city government. So I'm actually just as eager to learn from her as you are. So I'll turn it over to Director Donaldson.
Great. Thank you so much, Director de Guzman. I really appreciate it. I'm so glad I'm able to be here. I missed your annual event. We weren't able to hold this year. It's been at the Lincoln Theater the last couple of years and really has been a special occasion. And so I'm very glad that I can certainly be part of this community conversation. That's an important part of my job, is not just managing and the agency, but also and the housing strategy and policy for Mayor Bowser, but also communicating about it and being very clear that there are resources available. So I want everyone who's on this call to take away, if you only take away one thing from this call, from my portion of the call, it's that if you are in any way facing the challenge of facing eviction, you've received a notice, which you there isn't a moratorium, but some notices for non-payment of rent are still going out. If you are in any way, or someone you know is threatened with eviction, you need to know that there are protections in place right now to preserve your housing during the pandemic, and that you can either call the housing counselors at some of the community-based organizations that we work most closely with and help fund. Some of them are on this call right now, such as Housing Counseling Services, others, but I want you to recognize that there are resources available now, and you can access them, as Chief of Staff Handerhan said, on the coronavirus.dc.gov website, where the housing resources listing lists all of the various housing resources that are available from both DHCD, the Department of Human Services, the Office of the Tenant Advocate, the Office of the Attorney General, among other agencies. Of course, the Housing Authority as well, with their residents who are in the DC Housing Authority units. And there are people that can assist. So I'm going to give you some phone numbers if you're on the phone. And I'm also going to again stress coronavirus.dc.gov has an index of all the available resources. And I encourage you strongly to go there. If you don't have online access, please call us at DHCD, at our Housing Resource Center, 202-442-7200, and you will be connected with a housing resource officer who will help you and guide you and steer you to the appropriate resources. Or you can call the Office of the Tenant Advocate. That they are there especially to advocate for tenants in where there are disputes or challenges with landlords. And their number is 202-719-6560. Or just call 311 and say you need help and guidance with housing, and they will direct you back to our agency to be able to help you. So if there's anyone that you know that in your family, any of you in your community that need these resources and help, please call. I now want to walk you through some of the tenant resources that are available now. First of all, the council, yes, enacted an eviction moratorium. It is slated to end in October, but it could be extended. We don't know yet whether that will be the case. In any event, for 60 days after the end of the moratorium is still in place, meaning you cannot be evicted for 60 days after the moratorium ends. This gives time for residents who are behind in their rent payments or who have issues or challenges related to the COVID epidemic. You've lost your income, you've lost your employment. This gives you the opportunity to be able to gather some of those resources to help prevent your eviction. Your landlord must, if you request it, do a tenant payment plan with you, which would allow you to space out your repayments over the next year. And that would help in terms of catching up, but also in terms of making it truly manageable and making it, and they are required, if you ask them for a payment plan, you are required to have that. We already heard about the emergency rent assistance program that DHS administers. I will tell you that we are working very closely with our sister agency, DHS. We are actually working with the same nonprofit organizations that help implement ERAP. They're also helping us implement what some of our federal dollars are being used for from the Congress enacted the CARES Act to address COVID-19 situations. And we have established the CHAP program, the COVID Housing Assistance Program, to specifically provide up to 6 months of back rent or rent arrears. If you owe up to six, you can apply for up to 6 months of rent that you owe so that you can pay your landlord. And I can tell you right now, there are plenty of resources. We have all told across the district government, close to $40 million going towards rent assistance from FY20, this fiscal year, and to the new fiscal year that starts on Thursday, FY21. So we have those resources. Federal resources alone or for rent assistance or for from community development block grants is about 16 million. I tell you, very few of the resources have been tapped at this time. I know that there's some who haven't known about them, but I also know that I think the moratorium has helped people manage their situations in terms of not being evicted. But now is the time to really start thinking about having to get current on your rent and how to do that. And so I really want to encourage you to do that. We are, it's actually for area folks with incomes up to about 75 to 80,000 a year, but also very much below that. So it's to qualify, you simply apply to one of the community-based organizations like the Greater Washington Urban League, like Housing Counseling Services, like the United Planning Organization. They can, when you go there, it's a one-stop shop. They will evaluate you based on your income qualification for which program is great for you. So you don't have to go around to all the different organizations. You can apply in one place at one time and be able to access those resources as well. If you're residing in a small building with a landlord, and many times that's the naturally occurring affordable housing in the district, we do have a separate tenant-based rent assistance program that can provide up to 6 months of both rent arrears, but also forward-looking rents to, again, help you get through this period of economic turmoil and crisis. And again, Housing Counseling Services is key to that. Their phone number, 202-667-7713, or the Latino Economic Development Center, 202-588-5102. If you live in Ward 8, there is a special program that was established by Washington Wizard John Wall, and that's the 202 Assist. And you access that to get $1,000 for rent assistance. It's a very simple application. You simply have to income qualify and show that you've lost your income, show that you've been either laid off or and that you owe rent. And that's accessible through the Lydia's House organization. Their phone number, 202-373-1050, so 1050. I'm also pleased to tell you that we did just get an additional bump up of our community development block grant funds. So we have another $5 million that's just come in from HUD. I can tell you that there will also be a likelihood that there will be some additional federal resources coming that will help. But please, if you are in need now, apply now. We can get the resources to you. It will help make you current. And so please, I do ask, if you have needs, if you know someone who needs some help, have them apply. The resources are there for you. I'll be happy to take any questions and answer any other comments during the Q&A period. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Director Donaldson. I've been trying to drop in the chat some of the resources and websites and phone numbers that you've been listing here. We're also recording this as well, and so that will be available for folks as a resource too. So again, thank you for your presentation, and we'll go forward. So we can have the next bio. Great. So I'm really pleased to bring Tomas Arturo Talamante to the stage, as it were. As you can see here, he is the Deputy Chief of Staff for Mayor Bowser, and he is all things coronavirusdc.gov. I am confessing that we chat about him in our office about how seamlessly he navigates the community calls that the mayor holds every Wednesday at 5. Again, I know many of you are on those calls, but and we we announce them every week. But again, another important resource, the community leader calls that the executive office of the mayor hosts every Wednesday at 5. And he, with professional demeanor and a great knowledge across all of the programs and resources that are available in this public health emergency, Tomas is a great resource for folks. So it's a real opportunity that we have for him to join us and share his wisdom. So you can see his bio here, and I'm proud to introduce him to you now. Thanks, Tomas.
Thank you so much, Director, and just making sure you all can hear me.
Mm-hmm.
All right, perfect. Well, again, I'm Tomas Talamante, and I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff to Mayor Bowser, and I'm honored to be here with you all this evening and to answer your questions related to the district's response on coronavirus, which today I just double checked, and our Emergency Operations Center has been activated for 200 days on this public health emergency. So today marks the 200th day. But with that being said, so our Emergency Operations Center, which is led by our Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, is the lead for how we're responding to the public health emergency. And so we work with agencies from across the district government space, including obviously Homeland Security and our DC Department of Health, but agencies like Director Donaldson's agency, as well as Chief of Staff Larry Handerhan's agency, DHS and DHCD, and other agencies across the board as we prepare for, as we are actively working on the response for COVID-19, but recovery. And so I'm in the, I help facilitate the JIC, which is where all of our communications and in community engagement related to COVID-19 is operated out of. And so, coronavirus.dc.gov is the best resource for everyone on this call for the most up-to-date information on everything from different guidances from DC Health to the daily data dashboard, where As you may have seen, I think it was last week, we've updated sort of the look of the dashboard to make it easier for residents to understand the data related to coronavirus, as well as just different downloadable graphics for businesses and for everyone, so that we can continue to do our part to flatten the curve here in the district. And so, you know, I want to call attention to some of the items there, especially on our phase 2 page. We have been putting all of the mayor's orders related to our mask guidance, our travel order, and our every 2 weeks we update our quarantine states list, which the mayor had announced. If you travel to a hotspot state, high-risk state, you should quarantine, and so we update that list every 2 weeks, and that's also on the phase 2 page. But the different guidances that we put up are not only for business owners, so gyms or apartment or condo complexes, but they're also for residents. We want to make sure that you all are familiarizing yourself, so that if you are choosing to go to a restaurant to dine or going to a gym, that you're familiarizing yourself with how to safely do so, how to make sure that you're wearing a mask, keeping social distancing, etc. So we are constantly updating that site, putting the most up-to-date information. We're putting all the information related to a lot of the recovery efforts, like Director Donaldson and others have spoken about this evening. We put all that information up on the webpage as well. And so we just want to make sure that you are always constantly reviewing the site as it's updated every day, and getting that information out. We translate most materials in several languages so that we can make it easy to get the information out. And so we want to make sure that we want to thank you, because I know a lot of you on this call have done work to get information out to business owners in the community, share these resources with them. So first and foremost, want to thank you for helping us get the information out there. But we also want to make sure that any sort of things that you feel that would be helpful for businesses or the community, that you flag those up to Director Guzman, who will let us know. You know, we're hearing from our community leaders that we need more of this for business owners, or more information on the community, and being flagged a lot of those concerns, or even just items that you think is important. Director Guzman is always flagging those up, which I appreciate, and we've been able to make a lot of changes or additions, or even one of the things that I've heard a lot from Director Guzman is we are preparing to open some of our DPR recreation centers on October 13th for scattered programming, whether it's some of our indoor pool facilities or some of our rec centers, and some of the programming that will be available by reservation, which the portal opens October 1st for reservation. But we're going to have some senior activities, because I know that that's something that we've heard. Seniors are wanting to have some sort of programming activities, and we've done our best to provide those activities at home through our Fit Senior workout that we have on channel 16 every morning at 9. But we're looking how we can safely bring back some senior activities at our DPR facilities, which we were pleased to be able to announce that this week. So I want to just, I want to allow for the Q&A portion, because I know you all will have a lot of questions, but I just wanted to, again, make a little plug for our weekly community leader call on Wednesday at 5 o'clock. It's broadcast on channel 16, the mayor's social media platforms, and then we also have a dial-in, which I will make sure that we put into the chat box. But we have a dial-in where you can join and ask questions. But we do that every Wednesday at 5. We have different speakers join us every Wednesday to provide different updates to the community, and really answer your questions real time related to the district's response on coronavirus. I also want to make a plug for, we have a business community leader call every Tuesday at 4. That's led by our deputy mayor for planning and economic development, and the chief of staff for the mayor, John Falchicchio. And they're answering a lot of business focused questions and programs and initiatives. So we'll hope you join us for that as well. And then again, in the mayor, we've been pretty much having our coronavirus press conferences Mondays and Thursdays. This week, our press conference will be tomorrow, but usually those are Mondays and Thursdays. So we hope you tune in to join us for those. We are always updating on some of the most important updates related to coronavirus and other programmatics. in the district government. So those are just some of the ways that we're focusing on getting as much information out as possible, keeping everyone informed. And we're always happy to answer any questions or any feedback we appreciate as we work to continue our efforts on response related to COVID-19 here in the district. So look forward to the Q&A portion, and thank you for having me today.
Thanks a lot, Tomas. We're glad to have you with us. So our next presenter is might be our newest addition to our team here in terms of partners that we work with at Team MOAPIA. But Lieutenant David Hong is with the Metropolitan Police Department. Here you can see he's with the Special Liaison Branch, and so which works with all of the different liaison units for MPD. So we're glad that he is. We're glad that he's ours. I've seen him work with our residents. You know, he responds to them. His background is very similar to a lot of the residents that we serve. And so he's got a particularly sympathetic ear to the concerns that they bring. You know, we've been to meet with business owners and folks in the community together, and he's a great representative for us and for the city. So again, you can see his bio here, and I'm pleased to bring him to the stage. Lieutenant Hong?
Hey, thank you very much, Director. I appreciate it. First, I want to say thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on this panel. Just to introduce myself, I'll make it short and sweet, but just to get you everyone an idea of what we do at the Special Liaison Branch. You know, we like to really pride ourselves on community policing. On top of serving all the communities in the District of Columbia, what makes us a little more unique is we also work very closely with the historically underserved communities. In my branch, I have the Asian, Latino, LGBT, and deaf and hard of hearing units. And I also work heavily with interfaith or religious establishments and African communities. You know, basically, we're just doing constantly doing community outreach, working with the community. I have staff that, you know, pertain to my Asian liaison unit that speak several languages. I have a Korean speaker, Vietnamese speaker, a Thai speaker, and a Mandarin speaker. And so, you know, we just try to mirror the community every time we go out there. Another big aspect of my unit is hate crimes. We're the main source or where it would be funneled to. And so anytime a hate crime occurs in the District of Columbia, my team is going out, making sure we're following up, providing services. We truly understand that, you know, sometimes going out and being a part of that community and speaking their language can make everything a bigger difference where they are more comfortable to speak with us. And so we really try to bridge the gap between the communities and the police.
Great. Thank you, Lieutenant. So I am looking at some of the questions that have come on. There have also been questions that that we've formulated kind of in conversation with our panelists preparing for today. But before we go into the question and answer phase, this is always my favorite part of these kinds of presentations. I think that the presenters have done a great job of teeing up the discussion, but I think that the meat of the dialogue always happens here in the Q&A section. So, but before we go into that, I wanted to introduce our special guest. We kind of a late addition to the presenters, but because it's an agency that we work with very closely, because it's an agency that has a particularly important role in this time, we wanted to bring the Office of Human Rights to our event today also. So we're pleased to have with us from the Office of Human Rights, Nin Kine. Nin, I believe you are with us. If I can bring you to the stage.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Director, for that very kind introduction. I'm honored to be the special guest. Just a little bit about me. I am the General Counsel at the Office of Human Rights, and I've been with the district government for about 5 years, I'd say. And you know, I'd never been in government, and I absolutely love being a public servant. So I'm honored to be here and I'm part of this conversation. And prior to joining the government, I was in private sector litigating civil rights cases. And I've been doing this work, I'd say, for about 15 years. Interesting tidbit, I am from DC, and so I'm proud to be from DC. And, you know, I love to binge watch Bollywood movies when I have time. So that's me. So without further ado, I get started on my very, very brief introduction presentation on what OHR, the Office of Human Rights, does. So if we can go to the next slide, please. All right, so what do we do? So we are a government agency in the district that receives and investigates complaints of discrimination in the district. We hold public hearings after we conduct an investigation. We also provide public education and awareness of all the laws in the district. We oversee the Language Access Act compliance program as well. So as much as we do a lot of outreach programs throughout the district, you know, we're always pleased to have additional opportunities like this one to share with you about what we do and how we can be helpful to you. Next slide, please. All right, so the Office of Human Rights enforces a number of laws, but I've just sort of listed 3 for you here that might be most applicable and interesting for the audience. So the DC Human Rights Act of 1977, it's what I call the mother of all civil rights laws in DC and really in the nation, because it's a very progressive piece of human rights protections in our country. After that, we have the DC FMLA, or the DC Family and Medical Leave Act of 1990. I'm going to talk a little bit about that as it's very applicable to the current state of public health emergency. The last bit that I thought might be interesting for our members of the audience who might be employers or looking for employment is Fair Criminal Record Screening Act, which is popularly known as Ban the Box, which prohibits discrimination or consideration of criminal background information prior to a conditional offer of employment, as well as housing. That was newly added, I want to say, in 2016. All right, next slide, please. All right, so what are some of the areas in which the district's anti-discrimination laws apply? We work in housing, we work in employment, education, so schools, government services, and public accommodations. So public accommodations would be places like hotels, restaurants, that sort of thing. Next, please. And as I mentioned, the DC Human Rights Act is very expansive and progressive. And so it has 21 protected traits. If you compare that with the federal provision, which has about 6 protected traits, you can see we are very, very lucky to live, work, and reside in the District of Columbia. Next, please. All right, so what we've been doing during the pandemic that relates to the laws that we enforce. And so we've issued a guidance on the new COVID leave, which I'll talk about in a moment here. And along with that, we've also revised our DC FMLA poster, which employers are required to post. Next, please. All right, so during the pandemic, the council enacted something called the Coronavirus Support Emergency Amendment Act of 2020. So part of what that legislation did was to create a new leave under the DC FMLA called COVID-19 leave. That's in addition to family and medical leave. So it's a completely separate bucket of leave that an employee can take that the employer has to provide. And so what it does is that it provides employees with 16 weeks of leave. I will note the leave is unpaid. There are ways to get paid for the leave, but the law doesn't require payment. But it is 16 weeks of leave that you can take to care for yourself, to care for a family member or a household member, or to have childcare for COVID-related reasons, like if your child care facility is closed. The other important thing that this legislation did for leave is that it redefined who an employer is, which means that this law applies to really any employer, Whereas with FMLA, with the family and medical leave, it typically only applies to employers with 20 or more employees, whereas this COVID-19 leave applies to any employer. And similarly, it also redefined what an employee is. And so for COVID-19 leave, it's very simple. If you're an employee who's worked for 30 days for the employer that you're with, then that employer must provide the COVID-19 leave to you if you're qualified. Next slide, please.
Nin, we're coming up on time, so if you can, speed it up so we can get to the Q&A,
Sure.
That would be great. Thank you.
I will run along here, and so these few slides will be much quicker. So for more information about the guidance document on the COVID-19 leave that I've talked about, you can follow these instructions here that you'll get, I understand. Next slide. All right, so what does the complaint process look like? Next slide, please. So again, real quick, you can file a complaint with our office by filling out what's called an intake questionnaire, and that's online. You can fax it, you can call us, you can submit it by mail a number of ways. I will tell you one important part of this process is that you don't need an attorney to file a complaint with OHR. We will provide services to you to allow you to file a complaint with us. All right, and then once we do the intake, you can see the steps there. We provide mediation, we investigate, we resolve, and then eventually there's a hearing if we find cause as a result of the investigation. And I think that is it. I think that takes us to the end. Next. Yep, that's it.
Great, thank you. That last slide is really important, so I'm glad you were able to share it with us. It's, when people often aren't willing to report, right? And so for you to walk them through what it actually looks like is really great. So thank you for that. Okay, so let's turn it over to some of the questions. Again, we have had some questions that have been posed already. So thank you to everyone who has been chiming in. Tomas, I'm going to start with you. At the community calls, one of the things that we talk about is the hotspot list of states that require district residents to quarantine. Are there provisions regarding people that are coming to us from hotspots or from abroad, perhaps, or who are immunocompromised that are visiting or staying with district residents?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love to talk about our guidances because we have a guidance basically for every activity up on the Phase 2 site. But when it comes to the travel order and the hotspot state list, so every 2 weeks, on Mondays, we publish the updated list of states. And that following that states it's for non-essential travel. So if residents are coming in or out of the district, like let's say you're going on a vacation, you travel to a hotspot state and you come back, you would have to adhere to the quarantine order. Or if you people coming in to the district from a hotspot state would have to adhere to the order. And so we have there's a travel guidance document that is up on the Phase 2 page of the coronavirus website that lists exactly all pertinent information related to travel. And what the order means, and also for international travel as well. So there are countries that are on the CDC list. I believe it's a level 3 country. And so if you're traveling from non-essential travel back from one of those countries, you would have to adhere to the quarantine as well. So all of that information is available on the Phase 2 page. And so, and traveling safely, I think this question has come up a few times from on our community leader call. If people being concerned, like if I maybe am immunocompromised, or should I be traveling to a hotspot location? And so I think that those are looking at the guidances, looking at sort of what DC Health has up there. Those are decisions that we hope residents will read the guidances prior to a trip like that, or maybe, if you're going to need to do non-essential travel to a hotspot state for a vacation and you're going to a hotspot state, maybe you hold back on that and wait to go to that state till a later time. So we recommend that everyone, if you're planning on travel, both for non-essential or essential travel, that you familiarize yourself with that health guidance. on travel, and particularly make sure that you're reading through. The order applies for the day you return into the district. What is the current list of hotspot states? So if you, let's say you travel back and on a Sunday, or let's say you travel back on a Wednesday, and then that following Monday, the state that you went to is now on the list. It's for the day that you return back, but still be careful, monitor your symptoms. If you start feeling flush or start feeling any of the symptoms related to COVID, contact your medical provider and try to get a test with your medical provider. If you're unable to, we have public testing sites all throughout the district, whether at some of our public tests, and you can find all of our testing sites at the coronavirus at dc.gov/testing. But we just make sure, even if you're not having a quarantine, still monitor monitor yourself, and if you start experiencing symptoms, contact your medical provider.
Thank you. But yeah, so but also if you have someone who is coming from somewhere, whether it's a country that might be level 3 or whatever, or a state that's one of the hotspot states, does that trigger a quarantine as well?
Yes.
If they're coming in? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to make that distinction. So our next question, I'm actually going to go back to Larry because we haven't heard from him in a while. DHS currently has an online page and mobile app to apply for benefits, but can I log in with the same account for both systems? It's a very kind of in the weeds kind of question.
Yeah, that is a great question. I'm actually not sure that I 100% know the answer to that. We have a video which I can drop in the chat, which walks you through how to set up an account with the app. And my understanding is my guess would be you could use the same information in the app that you would online.
Okay. So please go ahead and drop that video in, and we will try to follow up as well as we send information out for folks. Director Donaldson, does DHCD offer mortgage or down payment assistance programs for home buyers?
Yes, we do. The HPAP program is up and running and has been continuous. You apply through the community-based organizations for down payment assistance. The classes are now being held online, so you can sign up. There are slots available at the various community-based organizations. If you're having trouble with your mortgage payment, the DC Housing Finance Agency, it has a mortgage relief program in place. And I don't know if Ruben's on the line here. If you could, Ruben, post in the chat, Ruben Foreman, my special assistant, is post in the chat the phone number for the DCHFA for the mortgage relief program. That's also on the coronavirus.dc.gov website as well.
Great, thank you, Director. I also wanted to give a shout out to someone else on your staff, Anna Van Balen. I know that she's taken on a number of different kind of COVID-19 related projects. She was actually my orientation buddy. We started work on the same day.
Oh, good. That's great. She's actually, right now, she's live, doing a Facebook Live with El Tiempo Latino. So she's helping get the word out. It's all hands on deck, all of us out there trying to get the word out in the community on resources. And again, let me just stress again, folks, please apply for the resources. They are not unlimited, but there are plenty of them now. So please, I encourage you, your participants again, to please apply.
Great, thank you, Director. Lieutenant Hong, obviously an issue that we have cared about here at Team MOAPIA has been a lot of the xenophobia that's been happening against many of our district residents, too many of our district residents, that's been unfortunately kind of aided and abetted by political rhetoric, unfortunately by one of our district residents at 1600 Pennsylvania. But obviously it's been a national epidemic. And we've said that, our district residents, our businesses in Chinatown, in many ways have been the canary in the coal mine, right? Like the economic downturn that they experienced as early as February, are now being felt by everyone in the district, unfortunately. But it means that also there are examples of harassment. There are examples of hate crimes that are unfortunately happening. What's your suggestion for anyone who experiences harassment or discrimination? And then related to that, what's the definition of hate crimes, and what's the distinction between that and harassment or discrimination?
That's a great question and point, Director. So fortunately for the District of Columbia, we've not had any hate crimes during the start of the pandemic, luckily. We've had some hate bias incidents, unfortunately. But the biggest thing I tell the community is we need your help. We need you to report, especially as witnesses. If you guys see something and you hear some type of language, hate speech towards an individual, you got to help report it. The thing is, especially with the District of Columbia and the MPD, we take that very seriously, and we'll make sure to come out and document it immediately. But we definitely need the community's help of just knowing when and where it's happening. But like I said, fortunately for the District of Columbia, we have zero hate crimes with reference to any type of Asian hate crimes with COVID-19 or anything like that. And so there's different levels, Director. So hate crime is obviously associated with some type of offense. But when we talk about hate bias incident, it's an isolated incident. It might be using hate speech, but doesn't rise to a criminal level. And, but either way, we document anything that has anything to do with hate bias or hate crimes.
Great, thank you. So the next question that I have, and I'm mindful of the time also, is actually for Nin. Let's see if I can dig it up here. Where was this? There is currently a discussion in City Council about legislation regarding racial equity. And ultimately, there are provisions that will require the Office of Human Rights to be a lead agency in terms of thinking about providing racial equity training. Can you share with us kind of how OHR is thinking about this now and what it might do as this legislation moves forward?
Sure. Thank you. I can try to quickly touch base on that. We've in the past worked with third-party vendors to help with providing racial equity trainings. We've trained government agencies ourselves to engage in this conversation. So we're ready and prepared to assist the district in moving this conversation forward.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I know that some of our MOCA agencies have been involved in some of the initial conversations that have been happening in city government as we've prepared for this legislation. And I will publicly offer our assistance. It's an issue that's very important to us, obviously. Sometimes someone once said that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are the people of color that don't always get to be people of color. And so when discussions about racial equity get on the table, we always want to make sure that we're involved. It's something that our commission is very interested in. We have several of our commissioners here on the call today, and so we want to make sure that we stand ready to serve as a resource for OHR and for the City Council and for city government in general as we think about this in a more direct way moving forward.
Yes, thank you. And I would just lastly add that we used to hold listening labs in the city. And whenever we have a next event like that, we'd be sure to get in touch with you to make sure that Asian Americans are represented in that conversation as well. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you very much. So we're coming on time. And so I wanted to take a moment to, well, actually just make a couple of announcements. We've said, I've made quick reference to a couple of things that actually are really important. So I wanted to kind of go back to them and revisit them with you for very briefly. The census is something that we've been talking about at length. Our first community meeting actually for the first quarter of FY20 actually concerned the census. And so we've been thinking about this for a long time, obviously. And so we are currently working with the Office of Planning, with the Mayor's Office of Community Affairs. Many of you have been involved with our census outreach work, so thank you. Currently, the deadline of enumerators that are out there collecting responses from people who haven't filled out their census has been floating back and forth between October 31st and September 30th. Currently, I think as of last night, Secretary Ross has indicated that they will continue to collect information till October 5th. So, we are going to continue to beat the drum about the census. So if you haven't filled out the census, if your auntie, if your pawpaw hasn't filled out the census, talk to them, help them, make sure that they fill it out. Our office can help you, so please make sure that you do that. Our early voting period is about to start here in the district, so that will be coming upon us in the next couple of weeks. And so we are working with the Board of Elections to make sure that they have enough staff to make sure that all of our residents who are able to vote can do so. So, when you get your ballot, please vote early and help us out to make sure that everyone will get a chance to vote. And then finally, there's a new initiative that's coming out of the Department of Transportation that you're going to begin to see in the coming weeks. It's called Move DC. So I believe the website is movedc.gov. We'll make sure that we send out the correct link for that. But literally, it has been rolling out to some of our agencies this week. So it's an effort by the Department of Transportation to think more strategically in terms of how its services are being executed and received by our residents. So information is going to come out from our office and from other agencies in the coming weeks. So we encourage you to take a look at that and just keep following with our office. And again, as we wrap up then, I'm hearing people already begin to take their leave of us. I wanted to thank our presenters for spending this hour with us. So Chief of Staff Handerhan, Deputy Director Talamante, Director Donaldson, Lieutenant Hong, and Min Kine. I wanted to thank our staff who have been behind the scenes here, but they help me make sure that we're able to put this in front of you. And so I wanted to thank my entire staff for everything they've been doing to help make this event happen. And finally, I wanted to close by thanking all of you for coming. So we've had a pretty good turnout in terms of how many people have shown up relative to how many people RSVP'd. So that's always a good sign that you thought that this was worthy enough to come and spend some time with us. So we hope that it's been instructive for you. We will follow up with information, including the PowerPoint. We didn't get to all of the questions, so we'll figure out how we can answer some of the questions that were posed. But in the meanwhile, I would encourage you to stay in contact with our office. You can, our office is currently under telework right now, but we're always available via phone at 202-727-3120. Our email, you can email the office. The general email is oapia@dc.gov. You can find our website at apia.dc.gov. And you can find us on many of the major social media platforms. So Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So on that note, again, thank you for coming and enjoy the rest of your evening and be safe. Take care. Thank you.